and that kind of stuff. So he's here to talk to us and share with us what his thoughts are. Sorry, I wasn't expecting that I will speak at the beginning. I got my topic yesterday, very late. Let me just clear off my mind, and then I would need to take a little bit of time so that I relax and you'll be able to understand me and my argument. The topic which I got, which came yesterday, says, it is time for the world to move on, engage Zimbabwe politically, socially, and economically. That's in brackets. Then it goes on to say, and for the diaspora to return home. In philanthropy, or when we are talking of change, the first thing is to look at the topic. I think so for 15 minutes, I have 3 or 4 topics which I need to deal with within the next 15 minutes. So I had to take a very good decision that I would be able to articulate myself onto the topic and try to come out with an idea. The first thing which we need to understand is the idea of moving together. But before I go to the idea of moving together, I would need people to understand why we are here today. The reason why we are here today is to look into the post-31 July elections. And why have we come out with the idea of wanting to look at the results of the last election? It is simply because the expected change, which was expected in Zimbabwe, did not come out as we all expected. That is very important. So as I move on, and all what we were actually expecting in Zimbabwe, it was political change or governance change. When we agree that those are the things which we're expecting in Zimbabwe, and that's why we have this all stakeholders conference has been called out, that whether you're ZANU-PF, whether you're MDC, whether you're coming from the bush, you would need to come and share with the people here. The thing called change, it's something which is very difficult to manage. Before you think of managing change, you need to look at yourself, see what you've been doing, and see that thing which you've been doing if it has brought the required or the expected objectives. Finally, my topic is actually talking about the people moving on, the world moving on. And is it the time we should talk of returning home? if the world has been moving with us, it has to look at itself and say, if they have been moving with Zimbabwe, this is the time they're actually saying that they are moving with that Zimbabwe. And it is our role as Zimbabweans. It is our role as Zimbabweans. As the moment we feel that we are being left out, we should stop the world to move on. There's no world without a small piece. I think the world is a globe. So there's no way we are going to allow the world to move on without Zimbabwe. If the world thinks something has changed in Zimbabwe, then we will allow it to move on. And we would want to see what they've done for that change to happen in Zimbabwe. So this is my argument. And I'm actually saying that the world should not move on living out of Zimbabwe. And therefore, ourselves, we should also we should look at ourselves. What we've done in the last past 5 years, what we have done is we achieved anything or we have not. And then we are moving into the next era. We look at what we have done, which would need to change so that we will change, we will bring the expected results in 2018. Right, where I'm actually going, that's why I actually said my topic is that there are 3 very big things on it. But I'm trying to bring everything together. Let's take a look at this triangle. I will draw a triangle. It's unfortunate we don't have whiteboard or something like that. We'll draw a triangle. In the triangle, at the top there, let's put the word. Right? Or inside the triangle, we'll put the word. Then at one end, we'll put our brothers, our sisters, our mothers who are actually in Zimbabwe on the other end. On the other angle. But the triangle has three sides or 3 corners. Then on the other end, we put ourselves as the diasporans. And we all want to get inside the triangle where we actually say is the world. So whatever we are actually going to do to be inside the triangle, the world cannot be inside the triangle without Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe from one angle cannot be, the diasporans cannot be in the triangle without the people who are actually in Zimbabwe. Are you getting what I'm actually saying?
Yeah.
Right. So whatever decision which you are actually going to take, what it means is that there's no way you're going to take of change in Zimbabwe without looking at the people who are back home, and without looking at the diaspora, and without looking at the world. So that's why I argue that we need to stop the world, and this is where our role as the diasporans should be defined. We had a role to play, which we did not do during the last election. And this is what I believe we should do. I like somebody who asked it, a question that, have you ever had any country where they've had one election through the ballot? I've got 2 inspirational people, very important people. Nelson Mandela, the apartheid, they actually said that let's leave the guns. We use diplomacy. The greatest man of them all, Mahatma Gandhi, he did not win by the gun. It was by negotiating, and it was by passive resistance. Yes, passive resistance. And this is where we belong as the diasporans. This is where we belong as the diasporans. Because we've said that the world is actually going to move on. We have a lot of things which I'll bring out, which will come out as I go on to my presentation paper. But I only wanted us to agree that we have a role to play as people in the diaspora. Before the world moves on, we would need to look at each country's government. And that is the only thing which separates countries. before you talk of the economy, before you talk of anything, it is the governance of any country. So when I'm trying to define the governance of any country, I'm not going to get the answer. I'm not going to give you the answer that should you agree that Zimbabweans, we should start talking of going back home. It's unfortunate Kate Hoey is our gentleman. Right. Then, what is it that we call governance? Good or democratic governance exists when the authority of the government is based on the will of the people and is responsive to them. That's one thing, and that's what I'm actually going to go down with. When most people hear the word governance, they think of government. After all, both have govern as their root words. And governance is about more than just government. It is a complex yet universal force that exists in all societies. People use governance in their daily lives to manage human relations, just as corporations and countries use to manage their interaction activities. And that interaction activity is very important, that the world is going to move away on its own without us, because it is going to need to interact with us, and us we are going to need to interact with the world. Simply the fact that we are actually the diaspora, just look where your role is interacting with the world. And we actually keep the word governance and how it moves. When we speak of the quality of the country's governance, however, we mean the degree to which its institutions, such as parliament, and processes, such as elections, are transparent. They're not susceptible to corruption in international business transactions and accountable to the people, allowing them to participate in decisions that affect their lives. It is also the degree to which the private sector and organizations of civil society are free and able to participate. Good or democratic governance exists when the authority of the government is based on the will of the people and is responsive to them. It is when open, democratic institutions allow full participation in political affairs, and when human rights protections guarantee the right to speak, assemble, and dissent. It is when government and governmental institutions are pro-poor, promoting the sustainable human development of all citizens. This is what a good government is actually expecting. If that good government is actually in Zimbabwe, if it is what we actually see in Zimbabwe, so let's move on. The greatest threats to good governance today come from corruption, violence, and poverty, all of which undermine transparency, security, participation, and fundamental freedoms. We have what we call the struggle of the commons. When we're actually looking at the history of sustainability of the commons, the enclosures, especially the people who live in the United Kingdom, we should actually understand the enclosures of the commons. I'll give you a good example of the enclosure of the commons. It's the Land Tenure Act in Zimbabwe. If you're a person of color, you're not supposed to own land. It's actually started here. If you don't have recourse, if you're an asylum seeker, you're put in an enclosure, you're not allowed to work. That's an enclosure on its own. For argument's sake, why should we pay for water when it's a natural resource? Why should people who are living in Chisumba be moved by that Rautenberg, and then he puts his plantation that they are going to make oil or something like that? That's an enclosure on its own. So, in the struggle of the commons, in the struggle of the enclosure, it is not the government who stands for you. It is the common people. It is you. And the enclosure which you have in the United Kingdom, and the enclosure which you have in the world, as Zimbabweans in the diaspora, it is our duty as diasporans to fight, to organize ourselves to fight for Zimbabwe. Right, today the quality of governance is attracting more and more attention within among other countries. The number of democratic regimes continues to rise, and good governance has become an important criteria for countries' credibility and respect on the international stage. Yet even as governance takes hold challenges, it also emerged. The greatest threats, which I've actually said, to governance today come from corruption, violence, poverty, all which undermine transparency. This is what we actually have in Zimbabwe. So should we allow the world to move on? Should we let the world be blind and say that they are not seeing what is actually happening in Zimbabwe? Right. Then, how do you know when governance is good? Because good can be it can be a very subjective term. It is important to be specific in its use. Good governance has certain qualities to it. It promotes equity, participation, pluralism, transparency, accountability, and most importantly, the rule of law. I'll come back when we are trying to engage with the rule of law and that why is it all of us, as we going to end this conference, I think you are all going to come behind me, go to the United Nations office and ask them the definition of rule of law and what they're actually doing about Zimbabwe. We are going to, if Kate Hoey was actually going to be here, I was going to ask her if she understands the term rule of law under the United Nations definition. Was she going to let Zimbabweans be imported back to Zimbabwe? And it is effective, efficient, responsive, and sustainable over a long period of time. Governance must be rooted in these principles to move society towards greater human development through poverty eradication, environmental protection and regeneration, gender equality, and sustainable livelihoods. I'm one of those people who actually believe in the 2020 in the Millennium Development Goals. Right now, the current debate on the MDG 1 are going to expire 2015. So the debate which you actually have at the moment, which all countries who are actually signatories to the UNESCO Convention, they are going to move the post-2015 the Millennium Development Goals. And there's no way you can separate Zimbabwe with the 8 Millennium Development Goals. That's why I'm actually looking at regeneration. I'm also looking at things like gender. I'm looking at the environment, the green fuels which our brothers and sisters are being tormented in Chisumba. This brings development in the country. Right. So in practice, these principles translate into certain tangible things as: first thing, free, fair, and frequent elections. I'll repeat this: free, fair, and frequent elections. So before you go into an election, you check at the system. That word which says free, fair, and frequent, it's something which would need to teach people. It's something which would need to teach politicians like Mr. Mateo. I'm not a politician, but I'm not a genius in my area, but I understand what this. There was no way we were going to allow the political parties in Zimbabwe when they actually knew that it's not a free, it's not a fair, and it's not a frequent election. We are not going to sit in our houses. We are not going to be on the video day in, day out without approaching the United Nations, without approaching the whole world that is the election in Zimbabwe going to be sustainable. That's our goal as people in the diaspora. The people in Zimbabwe, if the road was going to be clear, they were going to vote. So even right now, even if we dream of making 20, 50,000 political parties without these things which are actually tangible, we are not going in. The next thing, a representative legislature that makes laws and provides oversight. I think so there's a lawyer can help me about this. If I'm going astray, bring me back to my house. Right, we are actually a representative legislature that makes laws and provides oversight. Ours is it the representative in Zimbabwe? It's partisan. Yes.
Partisan.
Partisan. So how can you argue and say that they started deporting Zimbabweans people when you can actually say that our government, our laws, our legislative departments are actually partisan? So how can the world move alone living out Zimbabwe? Why should we allow the world to move alone when we're actually sitting down there? We have something to do, and that's something to do we should start doing today. Oh, okay. There are two things we need to separate. That's why I wanted to, yes, and then we should have an independent judiciary that interprets the law. Ours in Zimbabwe, it doesn't interpret the law. It only says yes to what the government says. The courts are not there to interpret the law. They are there to push an agenda. The police are there to push an agenda. So those three things are actually important. Then, they also translate into the guarantee of human rights and the rule of law. I want to come back to the definition of our rule of law. This is from what the United Nations say. And why should we let the United Nations get away with this? It is our role as Zimbabweans. It is our role as people in the diaspora to question them. Right. This is what the United Nations says. Rule of law. For the United Nations, the rule of law refers to a principle of governance in which all persons, institutions, and entities, public and private, including the state itself, are accountable to laws that are publicly promulgated, equally enforced, and independently adjudicated. Is this the scenario which we have in Zimbabwe? And which are consistent with international human rights norms and standards. It requires as well measures to ensure adherence to the principles of supremacy of law, equality before the law, accountability to the law, fairness in application of the law, separation of powers, participation in decision-making, legal certainty, avoidance of arbitrariness. It's arbitrary. You know, it's arbitrary than and procedural legal transparency. All these you don't find them in the Zimbabwean government. You don't find them anyway in the language that I'm actually speaking. It's not in English or in his mouth. At least I'm trying to attempt to say the big words. But even I try to translate them in Shona, they're not going to go. Why if Robert Mugabe is going to understand this? So it is our role. We have a big role. So when we let the people in Zimbabwe vote in election, we are in the diaspora. When I'm actually talking about the diaspora, I'm not only talking to you. I'm talking to the Zimbabweans in Switzerland. I'm talking to the Zimbabweans in South Africa. I'm talking to the Zimbabweans in America. It is sustainable. You communicate that you are next to Switzerland to the United Nations office. You go in and make your noise because we've got this. This is what how we define as rule of law. Is this thing happening in Zimbabwe? We have an embassy. We have had It's unfortunate. Mr. Makoni says the ambassador in Germany. If he knew his role as an ambassador, Zimbabwe would not have gone into an election. But we wait for a salary. It's unfortunate. So this is what I'm actually saying, that as long as we know our role as we are going to leave this room, would agree that we are equally to blame as people in Zimbabwe. We are equally to blame as the politicians who went into the dongas of Zimbabwe during the... Oh, okay. I'm almost about... last thing, okay, I was thinking... Right, why does it matter if government is good? Many countries are... Okay, I've done that. Okay. A country where the poor, let me see, I can't remember where I was. Oh, okay. Many countries argue that the quality of their governance is an internal affair. A matter of national sovereignty. Zimbabwe will never be a colony again. According to this view, what happens within the borders should not be of concern to the rest of the world. However, you know that in today's interconnected, globalized world, there's no such thing. And there's no such thing that the world is going to move alone, living out in Zimbabwe. There's no such thing as an insular state, which is a state which is alone. I'll come back to my argument again about the United Nations. The role of the United Nations is to help to create conditions of stability and well-being that are necessary for peaceful and friendly relations among nations based on respect for the principles of sovereignty, equality of all its members, equal rights and self-determination of people, while on the one hand, the United Nations Charter protects the sovereignty of the peoples. On the other, it was never meant a license of government to violate human rights. What Kate Hoey was actually saying, the United Nations is actually praising Robert Mugabe. It's actually congratulating Robert Mugabe that he won the election. So whose role? Who is going to remind the United Nations that what they're actually doing is wrong? Because they need to look at Zimbabwe on a bigger note, on a bigger picture, rather than on the election and all. As I will tell you something. As the Secretary General is actually stated, that's the Secretary General of the United States, of the United Nations. He said, sovereignty implies responsibility, not just power. So what does Robert Mugabe have? Oh. Does he have responsibility?
No.
Do we have responsibility as Zimbabweans sitting in here?
Yes.
But what we don't have is
power.
So let's empower ourselves today. A country where the poor have a voice in their government is more likely to invest in national policies that reduce poverty. Beyond this principle, however, there are other compelling reasons for us to care about whether the quality of governance is good across the globe. You see, when a government is not good for its people, there's no way you can actually say it's fit for purpose. I can see the moderator is trying to muscle me away. But the real thing which I wanted to articulate is that, ladies and gentlemen, this is not the right time of talking of returns. This is not the right time to blame each other of the election. Because we equally the same. Takarara neza mumukana, but takaenda kuma election. Isu tiri kuno ku diaspora, and everyone, we have a role to play. As Zimbabweans, engage the international community, engage in ourselves. The reason why we did not do that is that we are so fragmented, or we are so scattered all over. We don't have a vision of uniting for one simple cause. We are good at doing each other down. We are good at advancing
personal agenda,
personal issues, rather than advancing Zimbabwe issues. We have actually been left where I was actually going to go. Kate Hoey, she actually said that it's not the British government which is going to stop the deportation. It is you. It is us who are going to stop the world not moving without Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Before you go, there's one question there. Just one.
Sorry, Mr. Biti. I understood what you were saying, but my question is, you are talking of not pushing blame to one another. But my concern comes to the 5 years that we were in Government of National Unity. I thought we were people that were exposed to all systems of Zimbabwe. What degree of naive that was in our leadership, which led them not even to see some of these things coming? Because I thought we were people who were really positioned. We could get into offices, see what our enemy, shall I put that way, was up to. But we failed to do this up until the last day when we went to the voting ballots. Then that's when we discovered, oh, this is happening. So to me, I think there is need maybe to, okay, fine, it's not necessary to give blame to whatever, but I think something should be done to our leadership, because they have failed us. Because for 5 years they've been in offices, day in, day out, but they failed to pick out such things. I thought that was the reason why we went into the government, so that we prepare ourselves for a government that we can maybe go ahead and reign in Zimbabwe by itself without the assistance of ZANU-PF. I don't know.
Who holds the government to accountability? Did we do our job? No. Did we do our job?
There is a question there and one. So we are just allowing these two, and then we move on.
I also wanted to say the beginning of GPA was a mistake because people were not involved. Anyhow, it's not a question, but we should have had people involved from GPA. GPA was the Mugabe, Tsangirai, and Mbeki issue. That's how I see it. After that, when this was drawn, we came to a situation where MDC saw that the original document was doctored. There was mistrust. When you go into law again, when there is a legal arrangement between two people, it should not be unitary, but mutual. The mutual thing is already enough.
So you are agreeing that we should not hold people accountable?
Right from the beginning. Right from the
Which is our hope.
It's inception.
Which is our hope.
Thank you. Thank you very much, which is quite clear. Yes.
I'd just like to respond to your question. When you said, when the leadership was going wrong, did we do anything? You asked that question.
This is what I'm actually saying, that we have a role to play.
Yes.
So it's like giving you a gun to shoot someone and you're not using it to shoot the person. This is what we did. When the people went home, did we ask them what they are going to do? Because, you see, the good thing with them, you see, all politicians are the same.
Excuse me, let me finish the question.
Right.
Yeah. Now, my response to your question is that yes, we did something to advise the leadership, the MD leadership. I'm aware, you see, I read a lot of articles on the internet and what people are saying. And as all these things were happening, at one point it was blindingly obvious that the MDC was going to lose these elections. And there were a lot of letters written to the press advising the MDC not to go into the elections without the voters' roll. For example, they knew that this is it called Nico? they were doctoring the computers and things. But at no point did the MDC give them an ultimatum to say, if you are doing this, we are not part of the election. They just went ahead, and yet people were advising them not. And then there is also the issue of the roadmap. The SADC insisted that the roadmap had to be followed, but the MDC said, no, everything is okay now. We can go to the elections without the roadmap. So while it is true that we shouldn't blame anybody, and while it is true that people should have advised the leadership, personally I believe everything that people could do was done to advise the leadership. But the leadership was bent on proceeding with the election, even when everyone else was telling them that that was not the wisest thing to do.
Right. It's an area which I don't want to touch because it's, when actually going to an election, there are a lot of technicalities which each political party goes into. Don't forget, when we went into the election, there were 3 main political parties. There were 3 MDC formations. If the process was sustainable, if the ground was level, therefore, MDC, Westman movement should have won. Let me go on with my argument. If we had the 3 tangible things, before you go for an election, in practice, that translates to free, fair, and frequent elections, representative legislature, independent judiciary. Those 2 things or 3 things, the last 2, the judiciary and the legislature could have actually allowed people to go into the courts and stop the election. So it's all this is the technicality. It's actually what we're actually saying, that these things were not there. The only thing which could, if our courts had the power to stop Robert Mugabe elections, they went into the courts, which are actually parties, and there's quite a lot. But what I'm actually saying is that it's, before we think of anything, those 3 things are actually important. It's us who have to put them on the list.
Thank you very much. We are going to, what we are going to do is, we will be discussing some of these things in groups later, and also coming together in plenary session. So we are not done yet. But what I can say to that question, the issue is, I think we are doing something about stuff. We are here today, which is important. Therefore, let's see what we can do. What is it that we can do? That's where we want to be focusing on. It's no business. I mean, we know what happened. We know who did not do what, and when, and how. But no, what? So, what's next? That's the question.
I just wanted to say, whatever happens, we have to be, it's not for me to be top person, we